What consumers all over the world have been telling us for this last year is that indeed perfume has become an essential to their lives. To talk to us about perfume today and the art of perfumery, we have two IFF perfumers, Celine Barel and Meabh McCurtin, who are going to tell us about how fragrance makes the world a better place to live in. Hello, Celine Barel, welcome.
Hi, Judith.
I think that you have just returned from New York to be in Paris today. What do you consider yourself? An artist or a creator?
I am for sure a creator. You don't become a perfumer overnight. It's a very long and strenuous road. At IFF, actually, it takes no less than 10 years to become a full-fledged professional. So I've been one of the perfumers that have been trained at the IFF Perfumery School, and only the training by itself is around 5 years. It's 5 years in which you're getting to know the raw material, you learn how to select them, you learn how to assemble them. To be a perfumer is really to be the guardian as well of an heritage which is really century old. And it is also a heritage that you don't learn going to the university.
So indeed you speak about heritage, Celine. To recognize that, very recently, a couple of years ago, the UNESCO has actually recognized Grasse amongst the city with a world patrimony for their know-hows related to the art of perfume making and the art of natural ingredients making. Can you tell us about your relationship to the city of Grasse?
I am a very proud Grassoise. That's the city where I spent the first 20 years of my life. I was extremely happy when I heard that IFF at the beginning of the 2000s bought Laboratoire Monique Rémy, and that's one of the reasons also why I wanted so much to come to work for IFF. And then the second thrill was to know that 20 years later IFF would invest again and would be the pioneer again into creating this very unique place that I love, which is l'Atelier du Parfumeur, the Perfumer Workshop. On the ground floor, you've got a manufacturing site where every single fragrance is compounded by hand. And on the first floor, you've got the olfactive studio to choose between different atmospheres in order to soak into inspiration. And this is a place also where you can really focus on creation because you are totally undisturbed. It's like an artistic exile because you go there, you're totally suspended into a bubble of creation. That's, I think, right now my favorite place in the world.
Celine, the world of perfumery and the art of perfumery is very strongly connected to the world of emotions. How do you see that relationship between scent and emotions?
Emotions are a very personal reaction, and emotion depends on two factors: the socio-cultural environment and our own history. When a particular scent may trigger in me, for example, let's say eucalyptus, freshness, cool, and maybe something energizing. For Northern European, it may be associated, on the contrary, with the feeling of relaxation because they are using it when going to the sauna. So you can really see how emotions are universal, yet each emotion is not triggered by the same thing.
I'd like to spend some time going over the history of the notion, the concept of emotion itself. I was very surprised to learn in 1830 that the word emotion actually appeared in the English vocabulary. It doesn't mean that people were not having emotions or feeling emotions. They were calling it passions or accidents of the soul, but certainly not what we see as emotions today.
Yeah, indeed, the way we are conceptualizing emotion is very different today.
Yes, and even more differently thanks to the advances in neurosciences. Neuroscientists indeed have discovered the different regions of the brains that are responsible for a lot of the emotional or cognitive territories. Celine, as a perfumer, how do you use these advances in the world of neurosciences for your art of creation?
At IFF, the science of wellness is including both neurosciences and artificial intelligence. And now, as perfumer, we are able to create fragrances where we can measure the degree of association of a scent with a particular brain area responsible of some emotions. It's a very important feature of perfume because right now, with what is happening in the world, people are craving for positive emotions, and fragrance is able to reinforce this feeling.
Yes, indeed. I think we can all agree that people all over the world need positive emotions, and we now know that this is an art that perfumers have the ability to master. What's interesting as well is to turn to history and to travel all the way back to ancient Egypt, to Greece, and to Rome. And starting with ancient Egypt, at the time, perfumers were priests, they were doctors, they were therapists. Can you tell us, Celine, about that world of perfume in ancient Egypt?
The role of perfume in ancient Egypt was very, very important. And it's really like the first trace we have with the first written formula. It was a formula of Kifi that has been recreated by the master perfumer at IFF, Dominique Ropion. The Kifi was compounded specifically of like roots and balsams and resins, and that was the favorite tool to communicate with the gods. And the priests were burning most of the time incense or olibanum or myrrh. It was also fragrance that was used to accompany the dead for their eternal journey. And for example, an ingredient like myrrh was supposed to preserve the skin and used into the mummification process.
And now we're going to travel to Greece, where perfume was playing a different role because the perfumers there were doctors, weren't they?
What is fascinating is that you can see the evolution of perfumery is also linked to the evolution of philosophy and medicine. Idea that fragrance can help into the hygiene of the body, and they do it through spa, and they are doing it also in all the athletic games. They are covering their body before the games with oils, and they are covering their body after the games to mask the malodor.
So in Rome, perfume took on another different role, and that was the arrival in the world of luxury. Celine, in ancient Rome, the perfumers were creating balms and massages and oils, which were widely used by the Romans. Can you tell us more about that use?
Totally. So you've got, of course, all the aromatics essence that were found all around the Mediterranean shores. And you had the resins like the labdanum, the myrrh, the incense, the styrax. But then you started to see things coming through the spice roads like cinnamon, ginger, sandalwood from India, and all that were used at the ancient times already.
Celine Barel, thank you very much for this trip into the art of perfumery in its connection to emotions and this travel through time all the way back to Egypt. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith.
Welcome, Meabh McCurtin, and thank you for joining us today. What we know is that perfume brings wellness, but perfume is also an invitation to travel. And with you, we are going to travel. Perfume evokes a lot of olfactive memories and is connected to the memories that we have of the travels that we make. The brains of a perfumer is full of these olfactive memories. What does your olfactive library smell like, Meabh?
Well, Judith, I grew up in Ireland, in the west coast of Ireland. I had the smell of the ocean, the sea air, a lot of greenery, the smell of the rain after it hits the earth. I also have a lot of memories from my grandmother's house, the smell of the geraniums, that green metallic smell of the leaves, and also a very particular and unique smell to Ireland, which is the smell of turf burning on the fire. And it's a very smoky, leathery smell. So a lot of my olfactive memories growing up in Ireland are associated with this green, earthy, woody nature.
Well, with you, we've just traveled to Ireland. Thank you for taking us on that trip. And it's true that traveling creates these olfactive memories in a very unique way. Is that right?
So this invitation to travel, which perfume offers us, is even more meaningful today during the pandemic. For years, we've been able to travel in a very free and easy way. And people, they're confined at home and they're dreaming about traveling, about being outside in contact with nature. And the beauty of perfumery is that it offers us this possibility to travel with our minds. And I found that's something that I find reflected in my work, this desire to be out and to be in direct contact with nature and to travel. For example, thinking in particular about turmeric root, which is one of our beautiful new upcycled ingredients, it really gives me this desire to go to India, this idea of spiciness, of warmth.
And that is connected to an idea which we love at IFF, and which is that every single bottle of perfume contains the world. Can you tell us about this?
I think that's really captures the magic of perfume. That every time a perfumer decides to use, for example, in one of their fragrances, neroli from Tunisia, rose oil from Turkey, patchouli oil from Bali, vetiver from Haiti, for example, we weave and we forge a bond and a connection with those communities around the world that grow, that harvest, that produce those materials that we then use in our fragrances. And those bonds that we connect are special, not just for olfactory reasons, but also for emotional and social reasons.
We are extremely aware of is that perfume also has a responsibility to doing more good, not only for the people who wear it, not only for the communities and the people who produce it, but also doing more good for the planet.
Yeah, it's imperative that we preserve our resources and that we accelerate our efforts to work sustainably through focusing on renewable, upcycled and biodegradable materials.
One of the positive things that this crisis has brought is that consumers are today extremely conscious and active about their desire for sustainability. We've learned through a study on 10,000 consumers in the last year that 70% of consumers are more interested in seeing products that are sustainably produced than they were before the pandemics. We've also learned that 90% of consumers around the world today want a perfume which is made sustainably. How is that translated in your creation process, Meabh?
I think it's a collective effort. It's something that everybody in the industry has a role to play. Personally, from my point of view, I like to privilege the use of renewable materials, biodegradable materials, upcycled materials. A nice example of that is the turmeric root and leaf, which we have from Elmore, which is an upcycled material. Now we take what is a waste material and then we use it and turn it into a beautiful material that we can have in our perfumer's palette. We also have a really large selection of IFF Elmore for Life materials which we can choose from. So as perfumers at IFF, we have a very strong toolbox of things that we can draw on to meet these needs.
What this says really about perfumery and what consumers are telling us is that sustainability today is non-negotiable. And what's fantastic about that notion, which is an extremely tangible concept, is that it's taking us on a route where we use green chemistry, where we use biotechnologies, where we use upcycling and many innovative technologies in order to indeed do more good for the planet and for the people who live on it. Thank you very much, Meabh, for showing us how perfumers do more good and how the world of perfumery can indeed combine science and creativity for a better world, both for the planet and for the people who live on it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Judith.